أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن الكريم: وقوله الحق وهو أصدق الصادقين وأحسن القائلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقال ربي إني دعوت قومي ليلا ونهارا ولم يزدهم دعائي إلا فرارا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Respected brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The relationship between prophethoods and goals, nubuwwah and the hadaf and the goals of nubuwwah, could be compared to a prism, white light, and the colors which come out of this prism. If you were to see a prism, you'll notice white light enters from one side of the prism. From the opposite side, clashing colors begin to come out. When it comes to nubuwwah, we'll notice all 124,000 prophets have the exactly same goal. And the idea that they come to spread tawheed. Of course, some prophets may have the goal of preparing the people for the coming of Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Such as within the Bible, John 16 and the verses which are present within the Bible, which come and tell us that Isa alayhi salam foretells of who? Of the Comforter. Or Songs of Solomon 5:16, one who is altogether sweet. But in the major scene of things, we know that the goal is one, which is to tell them of Allah Azza wa Jal, Tawheed, the Day of Judgment, Nubuwwah, and so on and so forth. That there's a hell and a heaven, Hisab and Iqab. That's why when you see Nubuwwah, 124,000 prophets, will notice that there are dynamic elements and that there are fixed elements. What are the dynamic elements and fixed elements amongst the 124,000 prophets that Allah Azza wa Jal has sent to mankind? Firstly, the fixed, which is the goal. The goal is one. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Surah Al-Jum'ah, chapter 62 of the Holy Quran, we mention Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. Within this famous verse that we read on the blessed day of Friday, for it comes Salat al-Jum'ah, we may hear the Imam mentioning this verse in Surah al-Jum'ah. Within Salat al-Jum'ah, this verse comes and gives us, for example, 4 or 5 goals of nubuwwah, to see that there are dynamic elements and fixed elements. First, let's see the fixed, so that we go to the dynamic elements amongst nubuwwah. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم. He is the one who sent to the unlettered or the illiterate a prophet from them. Now, firstly, why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling me that He sends to the ummiyin, to the unlettered or the illiterate, a prophet from amongst them? Come and tell me, Ya Allah, I send them a prophet, that's it, period. No, He makes a point to make that I send them a prophet from them. This is the essential point. Allah Azza wa Jal, perhaps one of the points that could be taken from this notion is that a leader isn't somebody who doesn't know what's going on with his people. A leader isn't somebody who's isolated completely from his nation, that the minute he comes into power, he begins to command this and that. No. Minhum. He's from them. He understands the people. He knows the people. He's lived with the people. That the minute he leads, he knows what society needs. He knows the diseases that's affecting them. That you go into some countries, you'll see the leader, what happens? You see him speaking as if he's referring to Jupiter, as if he's referring to Pluto, another country. You tell him, are you see the people don't even have food on the table. The people don't have enough money to pay for gasoline. And you're speaking about these philosophies. And then even on another level, sometimes you'll notice even in the way we speak in the lecture presentations, sometimes what is being presented is on a completely different level than what the people are at. Sometimes you'll notice he may come and speak to you about esoteric things, and that's excellent. Nobody's belittling spirituality and esotericism. That all has its role. Yet when the hadith comes and says, we the prophets have been commanded to speak to the people, ala qadari uqulihim, the hadith may have said, on the status of their intellect. What does this say? This says that a leader has to know what's going on with his nation. When we come and we speak about the 12th Imam, Ajjalallah Ta'ala Farul Sharif, what's so great about that revolution? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It is going to be the time when the nation was the closest to the level of the society. See, when you look at the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, Imam Ali would come and tell them, Salamullahi ta'ala alayhi, saluni qabla an tafquduni. Ask me before you miss me. Why? Ana al-Qur'an al-Natiq. I'm the speakable Qur'an. What would he come and ask him? Would he ask him, oh Imam, tell me the mysteries of the Qur'an? Oh Imam, tell me the jewels that exist within the Qur'an? What would he say? He would say, Imam, how many pieces of hair are in my beard? That you'll notice there is a big difference between society and between the nation. When we mention the name of our Imam, what do? You'll notice many people, he puts the hand on his head. Why? Because one narration may have come and told us that Imam alayhi salam would place his hand on the head of the believers and intellectually they would be elevated. That Imam alayhi salam, we're going to notice what? Of course, paraphrasing that narration, yet we know when we do this, it has a notion where Imam would intellectually elevate insan. What do we see? We see that there will be not too much of a gap, that the people would be able to understand. Because I mentioned previously, or will actually mention in future lectures, that you'll notice that one of the elements to a successful revolution is followers. If you don't have good followers, you may be the best of the leaders. Yet you need a supporting cast, you may be the best of the best. Yet if you don't have a following cast that can support you, it's very difficult. That you may have the best of seeds, yet if the soil isn't good, it's going to be quite difficult to build or to plant something. That's why when Allah Azza wa Jalla refers to Rasulullah, what does he say? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Muhammadun Rasulullah walladhina ma'ahu. Look at the verse. He says Muhammad, the Prophet or Apostle of Allah Azza wa Jal, however you want to translate Rasul, وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ. Allah Azza wa Jal makes a point. He says, and those with him. Meaning, he had a supporting cast to continue and to complete the mission of Islam. That's why only when he rose the hand of Ali ibn Abi Talib, notice, when somebody came and collaborated with him, did the verse come down and say, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. Now, does this mean Rasulullah is in need of Ali ibn Abi Talib? Well, does this mean he's better than him? No. This simply means there was an element that was needed to complete the mission, and that was wilayah and imamat of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Sallu ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. Therefore, what does the verse say? هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم, from them. Number one. Then Allah begins to give me the goals of nubuwwah. We are aware now, we're in the fixed element before we come to the dynamic of nubuwwah. Allah Azza wa Jal begins giving me the goals of nubuwwah. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته. That number one, the goal of Rasulullah is to give them what? The ayat. Ayateh. Number one, يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم, and to purify them. Now, are these goals specifically for Rasulullah or for Nubuwwah in general? That could be said to be a different discussion. Yet we know, let's say this is at least for Rasulullah, and perhaps others have shared similar goals with him, perhaps, and Allah knows better. Yet the goal is pretty similar, we can say. Now, continue. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته. Number one, to give them the signs, to wake them up. Because we know Rasulullah lived in a time where people, for goodness sake, would bury their very daughters alive. وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. Lived in a time which was soaking and dripping with ignorance. He had to give them some signs to wake them up. يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. Notice, after he shows them the signs, what is he going to do? Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. He's going to purify them. Because a intellect which is strong without a heart which is pure is not a complete system. You see, sometimes you'll see the most intellectual individual. He's so smart, he's so intellectual, he's so eloquent, he's so effective in his presentations. Yet the problem is where? The heart has not been purified. This is why when you look at the books of, for example, Ayatollah Imam al-Khomeini rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, he puts an emphasis on purification. That knowledge without purification could be the greatest, or we can say at least one of the greatest veils between insan and Allah Azza wa Jal. Because now what happens? The more you gain, the more you learn, the more distant you feel from Allah Azza wa Jal. The more you feel independent. That's why you'll see the more knowledge he gains, the more arrogant he becomes. وَالْعَيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. The more self-independent he feels from Allah Azza wa Jal. Otherwise, what dropped shaitan? Other than this arrogance and jealousy from Adam, where he said, قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهِ خَلَقْتَنِي مِنْ نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتُهُ مِنْ طِينٍ. A sense of arrogance, despite the fact that some may have said he worshipped Allah Azza wa Jal 6,000 years, some ahadith may have mentioned. Therefore, يُزَكِّيهِمْ, to purify them, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, to teach them the book and wisdom. Now this is another essential point. He's not only going to give them the book, he's going to give them wisdom with it to complement it. Why do I need wisdom? Just give me the book, Ya Rasulullah. No. Because an understanding without wisdom could be very dangerous. Because we can say that a toolbox has the tools, yes? But if you don't know how to use the tools, it can get very dangerous. You can use the tool incorrectly, you may get hurt, you may even use it to kill somebody, وَالْعَيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. Wisdom is to tell me, how do I use the tools? Look at the words of our Imam alayhi salam. He says, wisdom is a tree. Its roots are in the heart and its fruits are on the tongue. Look at the words of Imam Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam, which today we're commemorating the Darbah of Imam Amir al-Mu'minin. They come and they say, Amirul Kalam, Kalamul Amir. The prince of words are the words of the prince. Look at the words of Imam alayhi salam. He says wisdom is a tree. Its roots are in the heart, but fruits come out on the tongue. That, notice, how does it start from the heart? Could roots of wisdom begin to grow in a heart which isn't pure? No. This is why we can say one of the reasons that Allah Azza wa Jal comes and says, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Without all of this, what were they in? مِنْ قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. They were in clear or manifest ضلال, astray, or evil, or no guidance. ضلال مبين. Therefore, we come and we see that the goals may be, we say that يعلم الكتاب, ayat, the signs, wisdom, the Quran. Yeah, then there's another essential one. When you come to other verses in the Holy Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal gives us even another purpose of nubuwah, which is perhaps as essential, if not more essential. Allahu A'lam. Look at the verse. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. He speaks about nubuwah until he says, لِيَقُومَ النَّاسَ بِالْقِسْطِ, so that they can establish the people, or لِيَقُومَ النَّاسِ, to establish for the people or amongst the people, however you want to translate it as, بِالْقِسْطِ. Qist is what? Equality, justice. Along these parameters and these meanings, qist. You'll notice justice plays such an essential role that we even come and we say, adil is one of what? Is one of usul al-din. Because if you don't have justice, then everything else does not have equilibrium. You may have a God, or the God, Allah Azza wa Jalla. You may have nubuwah, but justice is what they came to establish. لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. This is why God is the creator. Muhammad ibn Abdullah is the inviter. Ali ibn Abi Talib is the implementer. And justice is what's being implemented. Allah Azza wa Jal, the creator. Rasulullah invites, yes? دَاعِيًا إِلَى اللَّهِ بِإِذْنِهِ. Yes? He comes and he says he invites to the people with his permission. Yet, Rasulullah invites, amongst other titles that he has, Ali ibn Abi Talib is the implementer, yet justice is what's being implemented. That's why you'll see books written by Christians, George Ordak, by the name of Ali, the voice of human justice. Because justice is what made Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam so great. One of the elements that made them so great. Let me give you this story to clarify this notion of how justice played a role in the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, in specific Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. They say in the Khilafah, in the time of the Khilafah of listed Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, there was once a man who had a complaint against Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Therefore they would go, Umar would sit on the chair of judgment and he would say, "Oh, you who has a claim against him, stand here." He would call him by his name. Then he would say, "Oh, Abu al-Hasan, stand next to him." Instantly Imam Ali alayhi salam would get angry. He would tell him, "Oh Ali, do you not want to stand next to him?" Perhaps he was alluding, is this a sense of you feel you're better than him perhaps? This may what he may have been alluding to. Listen to the words of Imam Ali alayhi salam. He would say, "No, I'm angry because you called me Abu al-Hasan by my nickname, but you called him by his name. Treat me like him." Imagine, this is the Imam of the time. This is who? This is Hujjatullah fi ardih. He's telling him, my name is Ali, call me Ali. Don't call me by my nickname. Call me Ali as you called him. If you're going to give me a nickname, give him a nickname. That Imam Amir al-Mu'min, do you know what happened? Umar would go to him, he would hug him and he would kiss him between his eyes. And then he would say, "It is because of you." Along these lines, he would tell him, "It is because of through your mediation that we are that Allah guides us and we are taken from darkness into light." And this is the irony of all ironies. They admit it. They admit he's the mediation. They admit he would take them from light to darkness, yet still he has the audacity to claim and to hold khilafah when there is a man who he just admitted because of him, they're taken from light into darkness, from darkness into light. Therefore, we'll see justice played such an essential role. That these are the goals, fixed. Yeah, then we come to the dynamic elements. When you come to the Holy Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal gives you 25 prophets. As some have said, 25 names of prophets are mentioned within the Holy Quran. Now question why? We know 124,000 may exist. Why do you give me simply 5 or 25? Allah Azza wa Jal wants to tell you, this book isn't a book of entertainment. It's not a novel, it's not a story. It's a book of morals and morality. Therefore, I'm going to give you 25 prophets where you can extract more than enough morals from. And the Quran is infinite in its lessons and in its examples for insan. And what can be extracted from it. This is one of the beauties of the Quran. We'll come to the night where we explain the Holy Quran. The Quran, as days go on, as time goes on, does not become more obsolete. Other miracles, Isa's miracle dies over time. Salamullah ta'ala alayh. Musa's miracle over time, it dies, becomes more obsolete. Yet the more time goes, the greater do we see the Holy Quran. The more do we find out about the Holy Quran. Therefore, what does Allah Azza wa Jal give you? 25 prophets. Why? When you see stories are one of the most effective ways to get a point across. You'll notice, I may tell you, Ali ibn Abi Talib is this, Ali ibn Abi Talib is that. The minute you mention a story, wow, that's great. It's just like in math class. She may tell you, this is how you do it, this is how you do it. You tell her, I want an example, give me an example. The minute she gives you an example, things begin to become a little bit clearer. Why? Because man is what? Man likes to see tangible things. It gives us a sense of clarification when it comes to abstract concepts. Therefore, what do we see? We see he gives you 25 prophets. Why? Because you may not be able to connect with the story of Ibrahim. You may be able to connect with the story of Musa. Therefore, I'm going to give you another example. You may not be able to connect with the story of Isa. You may be able to connect with the story of Yunus. Therefore, I'm going to give you. That's why when they come and they say 70 or 70,000 layers, as some have said, may have said of the Holy Quran, that one of these layers perhaps is a personal layer, that sometimes you open up the Quran, you feel as if it's talking directly to you. You have a problem in that certain time. You open it up, you feel as if it's talking to you. That perhaps we can say one of the layers of the Holy Quran would be the scientific layer, the historical layer, the social layer, the spiritual is a personal layer. That's why when we come to the Holy Quran, Surah Yusuf, chapter 12 of the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does he say? He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ بِمَا أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ. Allah Azza wa Jal tells the Holy Prophet of Islam, along these lines, he tells him, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ. Look at the verse. He tells them, we reveal to you the best of stories. I'm not going to come and give you a simple story. I'm going to give you the best. It's for this reason, we'll notice that one of the most universal stories within the Abrahamic religions is the story of Nuh, alayhi salam. And that's why before we go into the story of Nuh, and to see further connections in the story of Nuh that are relevant to the event of today, the Darba of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, we'll notice that this discussion becomes even more contemporary and even more relevant when we see the recent film that was released in March named Noah, directed by Darren Aronofsky, $125 million film, as some may have noted. You'll see when this movie came out, its debut within the States, it made 44 million. Overseas, it made 55 million. Famous actors who starred in this film, Emma Watson being one of them, and Russell Crowe being another. Therefore, you'll see they put much effort into this film, yet it was a movie that came and created backlash and stirred controversy. In the Christian community, you had evangelists by the name of Ray Comfort who came forward and expressed discomfort towards the film. Because Darren Aronofsky, when he came out, what did he? He didn't come and say, I want this to be the most biblical film. He comes and he says, it's going to be the least biblical film. Along these lines, and I paraphrase what he says. It's going to be the least biblical film. Could you imagine? Now, firstly, this comes and shows to you and I what? It comes to show to us the arrogance of Hollywood. To come and take a film which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came and told you about, and to have the audacity to change it. Look at the arrogance of these institutions that we live amongst. He comes, he's not only going to take a story that God sent to him, he's going to take it, he's going to change it, and he's going to display it and show it in the way that he wants to see it. Despite the fact that God told you this is how it is, they have the audacity to change it. A movie which shows prophets in a way which they came to tell you not to live. Of course, they come and they tell us, if you were to read, that there were some scenes of nudity, perhaps, if I'm not mistaken, within this film, and so on and so forth. In other words, you'll see there were scenes which contrasted with the whole aura and notion of prophethood, and that flawless nature that they have, that infallibility that Allah Azza wa Jal has given to them. Therefore, Christians expressed discomfort, and also us Muslims, sometimes some of us may have went and watched the film. We may have left telling ourselves that, is this really how Nuh alayhi salam lived? Was this really the story of Noah? That perhaps it was what? It was a motive to change the whole revelation system. Because when we look at the world today, it's not a secret that God is something that certain agendas don't tend to be compatible with. You'll notice you go into some religions or into some schools, he'll tell you God should not be mentioned. You tell him why, he tells you no further. God is it's a red line. You can't mention God. You'll go even into China, and I mentioned this previously. In China, in certain areas in China, as some have mentioned in their articles, they would ban fasting. In France, we see what was done, and so on and so forth. We'll see God. Why is everybody so scared of God? You ask the question. Because God is it's the tune-up. It brings you back to reality. The minute you put God into something, it's an equilibrium. It challenges motives. It challenges agendas, and it can expose them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah is haqq. Yes? The minute you mention God, there begins to become what? There becomes a sensitivity. Now I may understand, you may have Christians, you may have Jews, you may have atheists in the room, and you don't want to speak about somebody that may have, sensitive issues and feelings in the room. Completely understood. Yeah, at least mention it in an objective way. You'll notice it's something which is a no zone. You'll go into world religion class, they'll mention to you God and what have you. But for the most part, religion is almost as if it's something that should be left outside of the school, not inside of it. So this story of Nuh, what do we see? They come and they give you the story of Nuh alayhi salam in a way which was completely, or we can say at least in many parts of it, not compatible with the true story of Nuh. Therefore, we want to come and see what is indeed the true story of Nuh alayhi salam, because some of the scenes inside may have expressed reality and the true story of Nuh alayhi salam, perhaps. Yet other scenes clearly clashed with the true story of Nuh alayhi salam. Therefore, in this night today, let us see what can be extracted from the story of Nuh until we later on connect it to the events relevant to this day today. The darba of Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Firstly, let's look at Nuh as an individual, because we know Christians disagreed, they expressed disappointment, and Muslims have. Or at least should have, if they have not. At least, in fact, it was banned in certain countries, certain Muslim countries, Indonesia being one of them. Therefore, you'll notice this can be used as a platform of commonalities between Muslims and non-Muslims, the respect we have for prophets. Yeah, this is another point which I may refer to later on. Therefore, let's come and see the story of Nuh alayhi salam. Firstly, Nuh as what? Nuh as an individual. We know that Nuh alayhi salam, his lineage goes back to Idris. Idris being the second prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Adam being the first, Nuh alayhi salam being the third prophet. We'll come and we see that the lineage of Nuh alayhi salam goes back to Idris alayhi salam, which perhaps eventually we may come and say goes back to Adam alayhi ala nabiyana wa ala alihi wa alayhi salam. Therefore the lineage. Yeah, when you come to the name, you'll see there have been disagreements amongst narrations as to what was the real name of Nuh alayhi salam. Some narrations come and tell you his name was Abdul Malik. Others come and tell you his name was Saqar. Others come and say his name was Abu al-Aha. Others Abdul Ghaffar. That you'll see there were a number of names given to Nuh ala nabiyina wa ala alihi wa alayhi salam. Yet some narrations say that he cried upon his people for such a long time. The narration may give us a specific time which he cries upon the people until his name changed to Nuh. Because Nuh means what? Nuh comes, you notice when we say Latmiya, Nawha, some may refer to it, Nuh, to weep. That's why even one hadith, very interesting narration, it comes and says that وَإِنَّمَا سُمِّيَ نُوحٍ لِكُثْرَةِ نَوْحِهِ عَلَى الْحُسَيْنِ. He was named Nuh because of how much he would cry about Imam al-Hussein. We'll come later on to the relationships. Yet they come and they give you a number of names. Yeah, he changed to Nuh perhaps because he cried upon his people for a certain number of years. This is why when you come in, they tell you about the features of Nuh. They tell you he was of weedish complexion. He was also big eyes. He was known to have a very hot temper. And this isn't interesting because we know he spent some time in Iraq, and Iraqis, alhamdulillah, don't have the best of tempers. That he spent some time in Iraq. Therefore they say he had a hot temper. Yet then when you come, they come and they tell you about what? They come and they tell you about the lifespan of Nuh alayhi salam. They come, Imam Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Imam alayhi salam comes and says that Nuh lived for 2,500 years. 800 before Nubuwwah. For 2,500 years he would live. And then he would spread the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 950 years. Because when we come to the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ فَلَبِثَ فِيهِمْ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ إِلَّا 50 عَامًا فَأَخَذَهُمُ الطُّوفَانُ وَهُمْ ظالمون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us along these lines within the Holy Quran. Therefore he would tell us Azza wa Jal that he stayed in his people for 1,000 years except 50, meaning 950 years he would teach to his people. Yet then, when you come and you look at the parts which begin to get interesting, that we can extract lessons and not simply history from the Prophet, because history has its role and history is essential. Yet if history is given simply as history, it begins to have little, if any, importance. It becomes just interesting. Wow, that's amazing. Yet if lessons are extracted from the lives of the Prophets, it becomes simply a novel and simply historical information, which may be of little or any benefit, may be interesting. Yet insan, Allah Azza wa Jal expects him to extract benefits and morals from the stories of nubuwwah and prophethoods. Therefore, when you come and you see how society dealt with him, you'll begin to see indeed how much oppression this man undertook in his life. They come and they tell you that Nuh alayhi salam, before people, they say the parents, they would take their children in one time in their life into Nuh alayhi salam. They would say, if we ever die, then do not follow this insane man. Could you imagine? To the extent that the more he would teach them, the more what would happen? The more they would stay away. And of course, along these lines, the hadith come and tell us that they would come, they would say, don't follow. They would express hatred, wal-'ayadhu billah, towards Nuh alayhi salam. To what extent? See, sometimes we don't have trusted a man because he hasn't taught us enough. We still need to learn more from him. We still need to see what he has. We still need to see if he's qualified of being a prophet or a scholar or a lecturer, whatever it may be. You'll see within the story of Nuh alayhi salam, the more he would teach them, the more what would happen? The more they would repel away from him. He faced a very arrogant society. Look at the verse that Allah Azza wa Jal says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَقَالَ رَبِّي إِنِّي دَعَوْتُ قَوْمِ لَيْلًا وَنَهَارًا. He would say, my Lord, I invited my people, laylan, night and day. What would happen? They would come to the path, فَلَمْ يَزِدْهُمْ. Allah Azza wa Jalla along the lines tells us, يَزِدْهُمْ دُعَائِي إِلَّا فِرَارًا. Could you imagine? They wouldn't, my dua to them would not increase them except what? Distance, firara. They would escape from me. However you want to translate the verse. Therefore, you'll notice a society which was filled with arrogance, what would they do? They would hit him. They would hit him until his ears would begin to bleed. They would begin to seep blood. They would then throw him onto his house in such a way where a prophet is very far from supposed to being treated. He faced such an arrogant society. You look at the patience of Nuh. 900, wallah, anybody who wants to learn devotion, commitment, consistency, motivation, Nuh alayhi salam is an unbelievable example. 950 years he would teach to them. They would treat him in such a way, in despicable and humiliating ways. Nuh alayhi salam would continue. He would continue. He would continue. Not only would he continue, look at the similarity that we find here between Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam and Nuh ala nabiyina wa ala alihi wa alayhi salam. Imam al-Husayn, he knows a society which wants to kill him. He begins to cry. Zainab comes to him, salamullahi alayha. She tells him, Akhi ya Hussein, atabki min al-khawf? Do you cry out of fear? Look at the famous lines of Imam alayhi salam. He would say, La wallahi ya Zainab, abki ala ummah, sawfa yadkhuluna an-nara bisababi. He would say, La wallahi ya Zainab, no by God, I cry about a nation who will enter the fire because of me. Because of me, I am the reason. Look at the mercy. Nuh alayhi salam, what would he do? He would do supplication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, telling him, Oh Allah, forgive my nation or forgive my people, for they don't know. La ya'lamoon. What kind of mercy and patience existed that a Muslim in this society is supposed to be patient. Not only is he supposed to be patient, he's supposed to expect difficulty. We're going to be questioned, yes, no doubt. We're going to be placed under the microscope, no doubt. Yet expect to be questioned when you have haqq, because haqq is hated by the majority. Look at the reason why Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam was killed. For what reason? Shimr is sitting on his blessed chest. He would tell him, Aba Abdullah. Imam Hussain alayhi salam would question him. He would tell him, Ya Shimr, ala ta'rifuni, do you not know me? He would tell him, Na'am a'rifuk. Anta al-Husayn ibn Fatima bint Muhammad. He said, you are Hussein, son of Fatima, daughter of Muhammad. Look at the question. He would say, if you know me, why do you want to kill me? The same reason he was killed is the same reason why Shia are being killed today. Look at the reply. He tells him, بغضا من أبيك علي بن أبي طالب. بغض, hatred, envy from grudges that we have in our hearts towards your father Ali ibn Abi Talib. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen lived how many years prior or previous to Shimr la'anatullahi ta'ala alayh? Yet that hatred is still in their hearts. And don't be surprised when they're blowing us up, when they're killing us, the grudge is still there. For goodness sake, the man, he comes and he says, I can't handle to see imamah and nubuwah in the same family. It's too difficult. We're too blessed. Allah Azza wa Jal has blessed the followers of Ahlul Bayt. And Islam in general, yeah, apparently they're envious even of the religion of Islam, a very interesting disease. Therefore, let's continue to not continue in this, because we know that at the end of the day, our goal is not to spread these kinds of issues. Our goal is to try to show the truth. And this is what I always try to emphasize upon. As important as it is to spread confidence in the chests of the youth, at the same time, I take truth objectively. Therefore, let us continue in this discussion. We notice then you begin to see that Nuh alayhi salam is the Prophet of Allah, no doubt. Yet each prophet manifested something specific, because today we don't only want to learn about Nuh, we want to learn about Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Therefore, when you take the story of Nuh, you begin to find greatness of Ahlul Bayt in the story of Nuh. Let me give you some examples. Because when you come and recite Ziyarat Waritha, this famous dua, this famous ziyarah, we begin to say lines such as Assalamu alayka ya waritha Adam, Sifwatillah. Assalamu alayka ya waritha Nuh, Nabiyillah. And so on and so forth. Allah, the ziyarah comes and mentions Assalamu alayka ya waritha Musa, waritha Isa, waritha the prophets of Allah Azza wa Jal. Somebody that have we ever stopped and asked the question, why in God's name is the ziyarah calling Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam the warith of Musa, the inheritor of Isa, the inheritor of Nuh? What did he inherit from them? This is an essential point. that each prophet may come with a principle or a value or a certain teaching to his people. That, let's say, Isa alayhi salam came with, amongst other things, love for his people, the notion of love. Musa alayhi salam may have come and expressed the strength of prophethood amongst other qualities that he had. Ibrahim, forbearance. Yet when you come and you look at imamate, did they have only one value, or were they the manifestation of all values? And this is an essential point. Let me give you the example. They say that Jundub, also known as Abi Dhar al-Ghifari, he would be standing or sitting next to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam until he would tell him, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He would tell him, oh Jundub, if you want to see Ayyub and his patience, Musa and his strength, Isa and his asceticism, Ayyub and his so on and so forth, he gives them the prophets, he tells them, then look at the man who shall pass by, who's like the sun in radiance, and like the stars shining bright. Jundub says, I turned around and I saw none other than Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam passing by. That within Ali you see Ibrahim, within Ali you see Musa, within Ali you see Isa, that within him was the love that Isa had, within him was the strength that Musa had, within him was the forbearance that Ibrahim alayhi salam had. That's why when the ayah comes and says, وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ, Allah Azza wa Jalla along the lines comes and tells us, أَحْصَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. Everything is in this Imam al-Mubin. أَحْصَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. That if you come and say that Isa had love, that may be one quality he had amongst others perhaps. Yeah, Ali ibn Abi Talib manifested the patience of Ayyub, the beauty of Yusuf, the strength of Musa, the forbearance of Ibrahim alayhi salam. For this reason, this notion, the manifesting values, we begin to see a number of similarities between Nuh alayhi salam and between Ahlul Bayt. Let's go down the line to see some similarities between Nuh and Ahlul Bayt. What is it going to show us? It's going to show us, beyond it being a feeling of consolation for me as a Shi'i and a sense of pride for my love towards Ahlul Bayt, it's going to show me furthermore that Ahlul Bayt alayhum salam are the manifestation. Look, what do we say? Assalamu alaykum ya Ahl Baytil نبوة وموضع الرسالة ومختلف الملائكة. أهل بيت النبوة, what? The household of prophethood. Furthermore, ومعدن الرسالة, a fundamental line. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة. ومعدن الرسالة means what? The origin of messages. Meaning you have the origin within you, ya al Muhammad. What does Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam say? He says, بنا فتح الله وبنا ختم. He says, with us Allah has opened and with us Allah will close. That Adam in the skies asks Allah, what are these names? He tells him, the first one is Muhammad, the second one is Ali, the third is Hassan, fourth Hussein, and Fatima salamullah ta'ala alayha as well amongst those blessed names. He would say, whenever I hear the four names, I feel good. Yet the minute you mention Hussein, something sad happens inside of me. Why, ya Allah? Adam alayhi salam begins in the skies amongst the other things he would do, asking about Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, that it would begin with them and it would end with them. Therefore, let us come and see. Furthermore, something so interesting is that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, when he would give his last sermon in Karbala, he would mention them things which for sure perhaps were beyond the level of reasoning. What would he say, salamullahi ta'ala alayh? He would tell them things like, our footprints are in the galaxies. What is he telling them? People are, what is he talking? Footprints in the galaxies. Our footprints are in the galaxies. Al-Fajr borrows colors from us. Look at the lines. You know Surah Al-Fajr? He says, Al-Fajr borrows colors from us. He begins to tell them things that perhaps were brain-boggling them. Who are these individuals? That now, when you come and you see these comparisons, it furthermore even shows to us the greatness of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. A family which is far from needing to be introduced, yet let us see some comparisons which show to us the greatness, furthermore, which may inshallah increase our love for Ahlul Bayt and Ali ibn Abi Talib, salamullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'een. Therefore, firstly, we come and we know that the Safina of Nuh, where did it start from? As some may have mentioned, in Kufa. Where did it end? In Kufa. That's why today you go to Masjid al-Kufa, there may be a place, they tell you this is where the Safina have landed. For those who have been to Masjid al-Kufa, they tell you this may have been the place where the Safina has landed. That it started in Kufa, and some may have said that it ends in Kufa. Why does it start and end in Kufa, as some may have mentioned? Yes, there's an essential point. Because when you look at Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, where was he? In Kufa. Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, ajalallah ta'ala for his sharif, where is he going to come back? In Kufa. Perhaps we can say Nuh is sending a message that the beginning of Ahl al-Bayt of Ali ibn Talib alayhi salam was in Kufa. The ending will be in Kufa. Therefore me like them, I want my beginning to be in Kufa. I want my end to be in Kufa as well. That if the flood of water is what was overflowing for Nuh, then it would be the flood of Haqq يَمْلَأُ الْأَرْضَ قِسْطًا وَعَدْلًا, which would be overflowing for our 12th Imam. That within my ship may have been people and animals, yet within the ship Safinat al-Hussein. Listen to the narration. Ahl Bayti, my family is like Safinat Nuh. My family is like that, of similar to Safinat Nuh. That if in his ship was animals and people and it was flooding on water, the ship is Hussein. What's in the boat is wilayah, and the flood is haqq and justice. يَمْلَأُ الْأَرْضَ قِسْطًا وَعَدْلًا بَعْدَ أَنْ مُلِئَتْ ظُلْمًا وَجَوْرًا. That this is on one level. On a second level, Nuh alayhi salam, when did he begin his mission? We know he would be sitting one day down and he would not be teaching to his people. Jibreel would come to him. He would tell him, oh Nuh, why don't you go out to your people? He would say, if they know me, they would kill me. Until Jibreel would tell him, I were to give you strength, would you go out? Listen to the lines. He would say, wa shawqahu ila dhalik. Oh, how I yearn for that. Instantly Jibreel would make a sound, angels would reply to him, and he would tell him, who are you? He would say, I'm the friend of Idris and Adam alayhi salam. I am the friend of those individuals. Along these lines the narration mentions to us, until he tells him also Ibrahim sends you his salams. Yet then he would then tell him to go out to his people. He would have a white stick, as the narration may have mentioned to us. This stick would tell him who the people are, and he would go out to 70,000 chiefs or individuals. Along these lines the narrations come and tells to us, he would go out to his people and he would begin to spread the mission. Yet when did he begin? And this is a fundamental point, brothers and sisters. When did he begin? Did he begin on any day? Did Allah send him on any day which doesn't have a significance to it? No, no, no. He goes out to his people on the 10th of Muharram. Essential point. Why did Nuh go out to his people on the 10th of Muharram? Ya Allah, let him go out in any other day. No, no, no. He's showing to him that I'm going out on the 10th of Muharram, so that perhaps we can say he wants to get some barakah from that man who will be slaughtered on the 10th of Muharram. Because what else? You know, this land of Karbala, Ibrahim would be walking, he would fall, he would begin to bleed. Ya Allah, what did I do? He would tell him, no, 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 you didn't do anything. Yeah, on that land, a man by the name of Hussein would fall. I want your blood to mix with his. Perhaps we can say that place where Imam Hussein alayhi salam was killed, 124,000 drops of blood from the prophets was mixed as well. That the minute he was killed, it was almost as if prophets were killed as well. What did Zainab alayhi salam say? She didn't say, Al-yawma mata akhi. She didn't say, today my brother died. Today the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib died. She would say, Al-yawma mata jaddi Muhammad. She says, today my grandfather Muhammad has died. Zainab alayhi salam, what is she saying when she says, Al-yawma mata Muhammad, or mata jaddi Muhammad? Along these lines she would tell us, she's saying that Hussein Aba Abdullah wasn't simply Hussein versus Yazid in Karbala. It was Muawiyah versus Ali ibn Abi Talib. It was Yazid, yes, versus Hussein. It was Abu Sufyan versus Muhammad. It was Habil versus Qabil. Ibrahim versus Namrud. Musa against Fir'aun. It was Haqq in its entirety versing batil. That's why when we come and we mention in our ziyarah, what do we say? We come and we say, فَلَعَنَ اللَّهُ أُمَّهِ أَسَّسَتْ أَسَاسَ الظُّلْمِ وَالْجَوْرِ عَلَيْكُمْ أَهْلِ الْبَيْتِ. The foundation of dhulm and jawr was what? أَسَّسَتْ أَسَاسَ الظُّلْمِ. They founded the foundation of dhulm and jawr. عَلَيْكُمْ أَسَّسَتْ أَسَاسَ الظُّلْمِ وَالْجَوْرِ عَلَيْكُمْ أَهْلِ الْبَيْتِ. On you, Ahl al-Bayt. That number two, he comes out on the 10th of Muharram. Perhaps there's a similarity being connected, that I come out on the 10th and also he would be killed on the 10th. On a third level, we come and we see that Nuh alayhi salam, how many people did he have in his ship, as some may have mentioned? 72. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, how many companions, as some may have mentioned? 72. Furthermore, you'll see the people of Kufa betrayed Nabi Allah Nuh alayhi salam. Now, can we say the people of Kufa betrayed Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam? We know that 17,000 or 18,000, however much history may have told us, submitted and showed their oath to Imam al-Hussein alayhi alayhi salam, yeah, we can't say Imam al-Hussein was killed by the people of Kufa or he was betrayed. Because first of all, how many people supported Imam al-Hussein from Ahl al-Kufa? You know Abbas ibn Shabib al-Shakiri. Along these lines, they tell us his name was one of the greatest companions. This man who would go out to the tents, to the battlefield without his armor. Usually you put your armor when you go. He takes it off. They would tell him, Ajuninta ya Abis, have you gone mad, O Abis? He would say, Hubb al-Hussein ajannani. He would say, the love of Hussein has made me gone mad. That we see Abbas ibn Shabib al-Shakiri, Muslim ibn Awsaja, as some may have mentioned. All of these come, Habib ibn Mudahir, great companion. They come, they tell us these may have been, as history may have mentioned, from who? From the people of Kufa. And this is why we'll notice that the grave of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, they tell us that Nuh would leave a plaque telling him this is what the good servant has left for Ali ibn Abi Talib. Within the shrine of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, when we visit Imam, who else are we visiting? We're visiting Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, we're visiting Nuh, and we're visiting Adam. Assalamu alayka wa ala dhaji'ayka Adam wa Nuh. Peace be upon you and on your neighbor, or however you want to translate Dhaji', Adam and Nuh, wa ala jarayka Hud wa Salih, and on your neighbors Hud and Salih. And that's why it's on a day like this which perhaps we can say Nuh alayhi salam is shedding tears. I know the time is getting short, yet today the dharba of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, just a few minutes so we can shed tears with Zainab alayhi salam on a day like this. They say Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen would come out of his house on a day like this, and he would begin to notice that his belt would get stuck into the door or into one part of the house perhaps, and he would begin to mention these famous lines of poetry saying, أشدد حيازيمك للموت فإن الموت لاقيك كما أضحكك الدهر كذاك الدهر يبكيك. He would say, tighten your belt, yes? أشدد حيازيمك, for death, because death is coming to see you. This is why Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, they say even ducks would come in front of him and they would begin to make noises. Even the animals had a love for Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Yet while Imam is going, there's also Abdul Rahman ibn Muljam, this Khariji, this wicked man jumping from one house of a Khariji to another. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam would enter it. He would see that there were people resting, or people may have been sleeping. He sees Abdul Rahman on his stomach. He would tell them it's the time of Salah. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam would go and pray his what? He would pray his nafila. Imam wasn't killed, as some may have mentioned in Salat al-Subh, in the Salah of nafila. Ya Mu'mineen, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen would make his takbirat al-ihram. He would say Allahu Akbar, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Imam would begin to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. He would go into the ruku', he would come back up, Ajarakumullah. Imam would go into his first sujood. Imam would then come back up. While he comes back up, he feels a strike onto his head. What does the Imam say? He would say, Fuztu wa Rabbil Kaaba. I have become victorious by the Lord of the Kaaba. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is struck. A shout comes from the sky saying, Tahaddamat wallah arkan al-huda. The pillars of guidance have fallen down. Al-Hasan and Al-Hussein would go into the masjid. They would see Imam in that situation, and I leave you with this. They would see the Imam alayhi salam. They would pick him up, taking him back to the house. Yet wallah, this line is what really breaks the heart. He would be going into the house, yet then he would say, no, don't take me into the house. They would tell him why. He would say, I see Zainab next to the door. How can Zainab see me in this situation? Ya Imam, you didn't want Zainab to see you, yet how did you let her see Abu Abdullah in Karbala? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. In the short time that we have, brothers and sisters, we know this is a very blessed night, the day where Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam was struck, a day which we can say has greater significance than others in this holy month. Let us raise our hands and Amma Yujib 5 times by the name of Ahl al-Bayt alayhum as-salam, wasila through them to Allah Azza wa Jal. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibu al-mudtarra idha da'a. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا. One more time. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. And to answer our du'as and to bless us with the ziyarah and shafa'a of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, we say Surah Al-Fatiha with your loudest and the loudest of your salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.